President Trump plans to impose tariffs on Canada and Mexico starting Tuesday, in addition to doubling the 10% universal tariff charged on imports from China. And President Trump, taking to social media, sharing this statement right here, quote, "Drugs are still pouring into our country from Mexico and Canada at very high and unacceptable levels. A large percentage of these drugs, much of them in the form of fentanyl, are made in and supplied by China. More than 100,000 people died last year due to the distribution of these dangerous and highly addictive poisons. Millions of people have died over the last 2 decades. The families of the victims are devastated and, in many instances, virtually destroyed. We cannot allow this scourge to continue to harm the U.S. and therefore, until it stops or is seriously limited, the proposed tariffs scheduled to go into effect on March 4th will indeed go into effect as scheduled. China will likewise be charged an additional 10% tariff on that date. The April 2nd reciprocal tariff date will remain in full force and effect. Thank you for your attention to this matter. God bless America. I do want to bring in Francis Stacy, who is an economic strategist, to discuss more on the impact that these tariffs could have. Francis, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us here on Live Now from Fox.
My pleasure.
So this is not the first time President Trump has discussed imposing tariffs. He did delay them for Canada and Mexico, now deciding to implement them because he says the high flow of fentanyl into our borders right here. From an economic perspective, how much of an impact could these tariffs have on the United States?
Well, in the short term, there will be some disruption potentially to the costs of goods, but Trump is a chess player and he's got both short-term and long-term goals. So the short-term goals are to increase leverage to get the countries to do something he wants them to do. And that's going to go along with his America First agenda. So if he wants to have assistance in stopping the fentanyl coming into the US, if he wants Canada, he made some comments on the tarmac about Canada not being fair. They won't let our banks in. They're not fair in our farm deals. They're not fair. He wants them, if they're going to take advantage of having the American consumer participate in their gross domestic product, their growth, then he wants to make sure that they give us enough in exchange. And he feels that they've been out exchanged with us for a really long time. The other thing that is very interesting is that in the longer term perspective, with the chess moves, he and Elon were not shy, and particularly Elon, when he appeared on the All In podcast ahead of the election, that if you look at the calculation of how the gross domestic product, or what we consider growth in America, is calculated, there are 2 formulas. There's the expenditure formula, which is the most often used, and there's the income formula. The expenditure formula has about 40% of our GDP coming from government spending. And that's federal, state, local, et cetera. And then they have about 43% of our GDP coming from small businesses. So what Elon wants to do is change the operating system and increase the GDP output from the private sector and reduce the government spending to address the debt and deficit. And so what they're trying to do is overhaul the system in general. Now, there's another approach to calculating gross domestic product, or our growth, and that's the income approach. So we have a debt and deficit that we obviously have to pay for, right? And there are 2 ways to do that. There's either raising taxes to improve the income from tax revenues, or Trump is trying to improve the income from tariff revenues in order so that he can keep, his tax cuts in and maybe even further lower taxes. So they're completely different approaches to dealing with those problems that we have.
So when the average American is listening to the tariffs, I think at least short term, a lot of people are wondering, how is this going to affect my daily life, my wallet, my personal financial situation, and what is the timeline? What would you share to folks for those questions?
Well, in the short term, the interesting thing is when he initially raised tariffs in 2016, it didn't meaningfully go through to consumers. So both tariffs as a cost to companies and also taxes as a cost to companies can be moved on to the consumer. So in the short term, there is some risk that the tariff costs will be translated into the prices, and that will affect inflation. But he's going to try to offset that by lowering taxes or keeping taxes low while simultaneously doing with the deficit. So your goods could increase slightly. If you are in the stock market, let's say that he really gets tough on China and he requires China to completely delist their companies on the American Stock Exchange. Okay, that could wipe out some of the market cap on the American Stock Exchange, and that could cause some market disruption and a sell-off. However, what he's really trying to do is he's really trying to make America, get America going back to where it was as strong as it was when they did the Bretton Woods Agreement, which is what established the United States dollar as the world's reserve currency. Right back then, the U.S. was about 50% of the global GDP, or gross domestic product, the global growth. And now it is substantially less than that, even though we're still ticking above China. And so what he's trying to do is increase this leverage where he makes America stronger so that we can keep the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. And the way he's trying to do that is he knows that American consumerism benefit the growth of all of these countries. So if he threatens the growth of all of these countries with American consumerism and taking it away via tariffs, then he knows that those countries could capitulate and it will make America stronger.
And as you were mentioning, Frances, this is a very strategic move on the part of President Trump for America. When we look long term, the tariffs are set to take place on Tuesday. And let's say the countries, Canada, Mexico, China, capitulate, and they do step up and they do more on their part to stem the flow of fentanyl. President Trump then removes those tariffs. When it comes to going back to status quo, I mean, the economic ripple effects aren't always immediate. What could then happen if those tariffs were then to be removed?
Well, the thing is that you lose the tariff income, but what are the fentanyl deaths costing America? First of all, the cost is the loss of life, which is the loss of the American worker. And one of the reasons China's in the position that it is because we outsourced a lot of our manufacturing to their working base. And AI hasn't completely replaced people just yet. So, we're losing our American workers and we're losing the ability for the American to pick up that production and manufacturing because so many people are either addicted to or dying of fentanyl. So I think he's very carefully weighing, but he wants to make sure whichever way these deals go. And the thing is he's willing to implement these tariffs because these countries will feel pain. And he's thinking that if they feel enough pain over a period of time, that they will capitulate, even if they don't immediately. But he's saying, okay, well, if you capitulate on the tariff income, no problem. The American people will benefit from the fentanyl thing. I think the thing that Trump is most criticized for is because I don't think a lot of people understand these underlying chess moves and these various calculations that he's looking at. It just looks like he's doing a lot all at once. And I think that makes people nervous because people are already in a weak position. Such a huge majority of the country is living paycheck to paycheck. They are living off of credit cards. They're not in great economic shape. So they see the headlines and they go, oh my gosh, our goods are going to go up even more. We can't stand it. We're going to break in half. And they don't understand that Trump and Elon are trying to overhaul the overall operating basis into putting America back in a stronger position like they were when we adopted the US dollar as the world's reserve currency.
Frances, we appreciate you, sharing your perspective and your expertise with us as the tariffs are set to go into place on Tuesday. As you mentioned, President Trump taking a look at this from that high level perspective, not just for the short-term benefits, I should say, but the long-term benefits as well. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.